Hello everyone, as you can see by my mini ears, we are going to be diving into another Disney film, and since it's not a princess film, technically, I'll be wearing the mini ears, similar to what I did with my Hunchback video. Now, in case you're curious as to know where exactly we are in sort of going through Disney history in the order of when the films came out, basically, we at first started with Hunchback, which again I explained and I believe I explained sort of in that video how we had to skip Lion King and some other works because they weren't based off of any original source material. And then when I did my Mulan video, I should explain that Hercules, even though it did come out before Mulan, doesn't really have a clear, concise source material to look from. It seems like Disney was just using whatever legends they could find from Hercules and somehow make a story out of it. So really, it's not based upon an original source material of Hercules, so I felt like I had to skip that one and I couldn't use anything from it. So right after Mulan came out, we have Tarzan. Yes, Tarzan. And Tarzan is actually based upon an original source material. I believe it's called Tarzan of the Apes. So again, a little bit of a different title than just Disney just putting Tarzan as the title. But this one is really interesting. It's very different from the Disney version. There's a lot of stuff that is fairly unique, I think, in what it's trying to say compared to the Disney work. But the Disney work also has an interesting take as well, and I'll sort of explain this as I'm going through with you the plot. And then after the plot, I'll sort of discuss little character differences that are still present in both works. So basically, they actually give Tarzan a name before he's named Tarzan when he's adopted by the apes. So his first name is actually John Clayton. And if you've seen Tarzan, the Disney work, you'll probably find this funny, and once I start explaining the plot, you'll kind of understand why his last name is Clayton. So, basically, he was born in the jungle. The Disney work displays clearly that the parents were on some kind of journey on a ship, and the ship, I guess, caught fire, and they escaped from the ship onto a lifeboat onto the African coast. So they kind of ended up there on accident. This story kind of makes it to the idea that they were already there and kind of maybe wanted to live a life there. From what I can tell from the research that I pulled, it doesn't seem like it explains this, but for the most part, that's where Tarzan ends up actually being born. He actually ends up being born in the jungle. He's not a baby when he suddenly comes to the jungle like the Disney version explains. And also in the original work, the way the parents are killed is actually rather different. In the original work, John and Alice, both respectively the parents, it's assumed that Alice dies of like natural causes, probably childbirth from giving birth to Tarzan, or I don't know if maybe another relative. It doesn't say specifically from the research that I could find, but it does seem like that she did die of a different circumstance than the father. So when she dies, the father, John, ends up dying from an ape, and this ape is named Kerchak. And you'll kind of see how Tarzan ends up being adopted by Kala, and Kala, again, is sort of similar to how she's in the Disney work, fairly nurturing mother figure. And there is sort of a discussion once Tarzan is brought into the ape world, sort of his differences, and that the fact that he is human, so that clearly makes him stand out from everybody else. And he kind of feels like he's an outcast at times. And this is sort of done, I think, well in the Disney work too. So, again, it kind of brings up that aspect to it. And the interesting thing, though, too, is that the Disney work really plays into the idea that he becomes lost to the human world. Like, he doesn't really establish a connection with the human world until these other characters come in. But in the original work, it clearly establishes that early on he sort of made a connection to his human origins. And what I mean by that is he actually found the cabin early on in the original work of where his real parents actually lived. And there he sort of teaches himself how to read. I found this to be rather odd because I almost wondered how can somebody teach themselves how to read? So I don't think that part was really explained all that well, but basically he sort of already establishes himself on to try to reconnect with his human origin, because again, he is human, and it kind of makes sense that he would want to find that connection. But it almost seems like in the Disney work they just play out the idea that he's just different and he's an outcast, and sometimes he causes problems unintentionally, and you'll sort of see these kinds of things happen. And it's also important to note that unlike the Disney version, there is no cheetah. There is no cheetah that wants to kill gorillas and kill people. In the Disney work, the cheetah is the one that kills the parents, in the Disney work, the parents are killed by Tarzan's parents are killed by the cheetah, and it also mentions in the beginning how there's a little ape, I don't know how you call an ape child that's killed by a cheetah, or I believe it's a cheetah, or some kind of lion-like animal. I'm sure it's a cheetah. But basically, he's sort of treated as a side villain in the Disney work. There is no mention of a cheetah at all in the original work. The original work sort of plays into the idea that even gorillas themselves are kind of dangerous, again with having the whole idea of Kerchak being the one to kill the parents. But you'll realize Kerchak is a rather different character in the Disney work. In the Disney work, he doesn't harm really anybody unless that's someone he considers to be a threat. He's sort of a misunderstood character, and the fact that his wife, who is Kala in this case, in the Disney work, comes back with this other child that ends up being Tarzan, sort of turns Kerchak off, and you kind of understand the father-son complications sort of in the Disney work. So they really tried to play him out as a more sympathetic character in the Disney work. But in the original work, he's fairly ruthless. He really doesn't have a lot of dimension to him, but it seemed like in the Disney work they were trying to give him more of a story, more of an impact, and try to actually make him be, I guess, more of a decent character. So again, there's really that aspect. And it's important to note that in the original work, one day when Tarzan ends up coming back from reading, he ends up coming across a gorilla, and the gorilla attacks him and tries to hurt him, and Tarzan ultimately ends up killing the gorilla. This allows him to become a really skilled hunter and really well off In the Disney work, it's really painted that Tarzan doesn't really know in the beginning how to be a gorilla. He doesn't really blend in all that well with people and sticks out sort of as a sore thumb. And that's what ends up causing a lot of problems. And then having Kerchak to being sort of the irritated father figure who really doesn't want to be sort of a father figure to Tarzan in the way beginning. Even in the beginning, he goes, in the Disney work, just because he can stay, that doesn't make him my son. You know, sort of like, I mean, it is cruel, but at the same time, he's like, you know, this kid is not my child, and it's not my blood, so I'm not gonna try to be a father figure to him. And it's really kind of displayed sort of in the beginning that he kind of sees him as inferior, especially considering the fact that he's human. So, again, there's these kinds of animal-human dilemmas going on in the Disney work. But really, in the original work, Kerchak is not necessarily annoyed by Tarzan, like in the Disney work. He's jealous. Because he sees Tarzan being this really cool, good hunter, and he just does not like it at all. And ultimately, this leads to a fight, and Tarzan ultimately kills him. So really, Kerchak in this story is sort of like the cheetah. He's treated as a vicious animal who doesn't know any better. But in the Disney work, they play him out as way more humanistic. They make him a lot more like Kala in a respect, but different in that he won't accept Tarzan at first. It's also important to note that Kala actually dies in the original work. In the Disney work, she survives the whole way through. She is in danger at times, but Tarzan comes in and saves her, or other people come and help her as well, and he's also very supportive of his mom, even though he feels like at times that he's still separate from this world because he's not really of the same species. So again, you see those kinds of mother-son dynamics going on in the Disney work, but it's not really all displayed all so much because she ends up being killed off in the original work by an African tribe that comes in, and there are no Africans in the Disney work at all. It's all white people for the most part, and the result of him in the original work having to deal with the fact that his mother was killed makes him very vengeful and angry, and so he goes to the village that and sort of pranks and raids on the place and for weapons, and he just does all this random stuff that's intended to piss them off because he's very angry that one of the hunters of the tribe killed his mom, his adopted mom. So, or his mom that adopted him. But basically, that's really how the original work plays itself out. It really plays to the idea that Tarzan has become, has in certain respects these fairly animalistic type characteristics, while also still being fairly intelligent in the fact that he can go and read, and I still don't get that. How can you learn to read on your own? That doesn't make sense to me. But basically, after he raids and kind of creates havoc for this African tribe, it is mentioned that there are a compilation of short stories, and these short stories sort of encompass what ends up happening after this point, and they're basically called the Jungle Tales of Tarzan. And this sort of starts off with, again, him being popular, and that's actually when we get into the whole thing that I was talking about with Kerchak, and how he ultimately gets jealous, and to the point where he asks Tarzan to challenge him, and Tarzan defeats him and kills him. So really, that ends up happening afterwards. In the Disney work, Tarzan, I think, tries throughout the entire film to earn Kerchak's approval. He really tries to be this. He tries to fulfill the role of being a son. There are times where Kerchak, I think, sort of approves of him, and then other times where that approval sinks, and you'll sort of see when that happens, and what ends up leading to those points in the Disney work. But really, again, completely different characters, which I found to be so interesting and odd that Disney decided not to go this route with this character. But basically, after in the original work he kills Kerchak, he technically this is when he becomes King of the Apes. In the Disney work, it's only displayed towards the end when he sort of takes the place as the King of the Apes. Because you'll see that Kerchak ends up dying, but under completely different circumstances, and this is really when he ultimately declares his kind of fatherly love for Tarzan, and then ultimately dies and says, "You have the right to take my place. You have the right to have this leadership now." So that's really how the Disney work plays with this character. In that it's sort of like giving his title away, and in the original work it's just displayed as a contest of who's better, and Tarzan ends up being better. So it's really, I think it's a little bit more one-dimensional, where the Disney work really tries to play this relationship out with a little bit more dimension. But basically in the original work, after Tarzan kills Kerchak, these white people come. And these white people include Jane Porter, who again we do see in the Disney work, her father, as well as William Cecil Clayton? Yeah. Clayton. And didn't I mention that Tarzan's name was Clayton in the earlier? Yeah, so you'll kind of see how this all kind of connects. And basically, Tarzan realizes that these people are here, and he sort of spies on them, he aids them, and saves Jane from different perils, sort of similar to the Disney work. You know, he is curious about these humans coming in, and he wants to know more about these people, and this is really the first time in the Disney work where we actually see him being in actual contact with humans, unlike the original work where we see an African tribe come in. So really his first impression of humans is really in the Disney work of these characters. So basically, there's also another character that is in the original work that's not in the Disney work whatsoever, and he's a French naval officer named Paul d'Arnaut, and basically Tarzan saves him from the natives at one point, and he is the one that teaches Tarzan how to be civilized, and he teaches him French as well, because again he's French, so it makes sense that he would teach him French. But really, he's Tarzan's mentor. In the Disney work, Jane is the mentor. Jane's the person who teaches him how to read, how to write, how to sort of speak, or tries to interact with him and show him the human world. Really, she is the focal point in Tarzan's development in the Disney work, but she's kind of not displayed that way in the original work. In the original work, she's more treated as a love interest because, again, it is emphasized that they meet on several occasions, and Tarzan ends up developing feelings for her. And there's also a point in the original work where Tarzan decides to travel to America. And again, Jane is actually American in the original work. She's not English or British. She's American. And then this is where he learns that she is engaged to William Clayton, the one that I mentioned earlier. And his mentor, Day Arnett, in the original work, basically goes to Tarzan's cabin and sort of looks at what he can find, and he sort of puts the pieces together as to who Tarzan is and what his origins are. And apparently his parents were fairly well off, and ultimately, when all of this is sort of revealed to Tarzan, I believe it's also mentioned too that Tarzan actually kind of looks into this as well. He decides not to reveal any of this information and instead remain in the jungle and allow Jane to have her happiness with William Clayton. And in case you wanted to know, yes, William Clayton is related to Tarzan. He is a cousin, I believe, of Tarzan. So, again, they are relatives, but it doesn't seem like that the original work paints itself as someone, or it seems like in the original work it doesn't paint that they have a relationship. It doesn't try to make it so that these characters really connect, almost, I would say, at least from these books that I've mentioned, or this book and short stories. It might be that the other novels that come afterwards focus maybe more in on it, I'm not sure, but I'm just judging this based upon what Disney was trying to base their story on. So, for the most part, that's how the original work ends, with Tarzan sort of going back into the jungle and leaving Jane to marry his cousin. And also, again, there are other books that followed, and ultimately, however the circumstances, Tarzan ends up ultimately marrying Jane, and they end up having a child named Korak. So again, it's sort of these sort of books and tales kind of continue on, but really Disney was trying to base itself more on this book. I can kind of see why, because there are these like little hints of similarity in there, just a sort of changing around of characters. So really that's how the original work sort of ends, with Tarzan sort of ultimately sacrificing his happiness and for Jane's happiness, and sort of says to himself, I should go back to where I was, and I think it would be better that way. So he's not really an egotistical character. He's not like somebody who wants wealth and who wants prestige and authority, because he doesn't really understand those things, because again, he was living pretty much all of his life in an ape culture, so he doesn't really understand the whole point of showing, or he doesn't know the point of wealth and prestige, because again, his family was wealthy, and he doesn't really understand the concept of money, and so it kind of makes sense, and it would be in character, I think, for him to decide ultimately to go back to the jungle. So that's really the original work. The Disney work, oh my gosh, how to explain the Disney work now, because it's so different. basically, again, you had, like I mentioned, Kerchak and Tarzan sort of having this complicated son/father relationship, and Kala being the supportive mom. And then Tarzan ultimately discovering Jane and her father and Clayton. Now, Clayton is another character. William Clayton, I guess, is another completely different character. He's not related to Tarzan at all in the Disney work. He is a villain, actually. The Disney work, I guess, felt like they needed a human villain. And Clayton was the one they wanted to go with. So, basically, what ends up happening in the Disney work is that Tarzan, ultimately, after interacting with humans for so long, Clayton has his own sort of agenda during this time as Tarzan sort of appears. In that they can't find gorillas, and they want to find these gorillas. And the reason why Clayton in particular wants to find these gorillas is for a different reason than what Jane and her father want to find them for in the Disney work. In the Disney work, Jane and her father want to sort of study them and draw pictures of them and be like sort of, I don't want to say scientific, because I don't really know if they can call themselves scientists, but they just want to sort of observe the ape world. And Clayton wants just money. He wants to use these apes for sort of a museum, or technically a zoo maybe, and just put them in cages and just kind of treat them like they're animals, and that they're not worth of having freedom to be in the wild. So really, it's a kind of cliche villain. It is kind of odd that Disney decided to go with this, but at the same time, I think it still kind of serves the story in like how Tarzan is sort of torn between the ape world and the human world. And there's one point too where Tarzan feels like he should go and be with the humans, and with Jane. So, and it's really established too that he does love her. So again, it's the same character relationship. But ultimately, what ends up happening is that Clayton sort of ends up tricking them. And if you choose to watch the Disney work, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But basically, he tricks them and sort of hides the fact that he wants to use these apes for a zoo. And basically, once Tarzan leads them to the apes, Clayton has everything ready at his disposal, and basically he just has his men sort of charge out and capture all the apes and take them aboard, or have all the apes captured. And then there's this whole fight that ensues between the animals, and then Jane and obviously her father are totally against Clayton wanting to do this. So again, there is this fact that there is this sort of separation. I think it would have been a little bit more interesting had they made Jane and maybe Clayton sort of together in the Disney work, and then having to play out the idea that really Jane's end up seeing for what he is, and that he's a greedy, selfish person, and then seeing all of the things that Tarzan has to offer in the process. I think would have made her character a little bit more complex, and having to deal with this issue, and having to sort of go along with and ultimately choosing a side. But in this one, in this Disney work, it's clear that she's on Tarzan's side, and that it wasn't that she didn't know about anything that was really going on. And it was also emphasized too in the Disney work that Jane is ultimately leaving, and Tarzan doesn't obviously want her to leave, but at the same time, he's willing to sort of sacrifice his life in the jungle with his friends and with his mom to go and be with her and be with the human world. So really there's this really torn up aspect in the Disney work that I think plays out really well. I just think the execution side of the villain might be a little bit weak. But ultimately what ends up happening is good ends up triumphing. Clayton ends up being given a interesting, gruesome sort of death in the Disney work, and then ultimately Kerchak dies. I think he dies in actually defense of Tarzan. I'm trying to remember. I think Clayton did shoot him, and then Tarzan came to Kerchak, and then ultimately he knew there was nothing that he could do, that he was pretty much a goner, and that due to Tarzan trying to make things right and trying to be sort of the leader, Clayton says that, you know, I've seen your noble your nobleness, and I appreciate that, and I feel like that it would be best to call you my son and for you to take my place. So really and I thought that was really touching, actually, and worked, and that's how ultimately Tarzan becomes king in the Disney work of the jungle. And then again there is this emphasis that Jane is leaving, but then she sort of realizes, why do I have to go back? And she sort of ends up liking this kind of ape world, and so she and her father ultimately decide to stay, and then that's how the Disney work ends. Everybody stays in the jungle and sort of lives out their life in the jungle, and happily ever after. Woohoo! So that's really how the Disney work plays itself out. I think that's really all I can say plot-wise. It really is different. It seems like in the original work Tarzan was more sacrificial, with Jane not really doing anything, and then in the Disney work it was sort of like this dual aspect, like Tarzan was going to try and leave, but at the same time Jane ultimately decided that it would be best for everybody if they stayed too, her and her father. So really, again, that's sort of what the Disney work decides to throw out there. Now, as far as characters are concerned, I would say Tarzan is probably similar in certain aspects in both works. He has this tough but yet sensitive side. You kind of see that in the Disney work with the visuals and how, you know, he is very aggressive and defensive for those that he cares about, but then at the same time he has this really soft and gentle side, and then there is this desire for him to learn, again, in both works. But again, I think it is emphasized more in his character early on that he has these human traits already, that he has he is trying to return to his roots in the original work, but the Disney work plays it out that he's more of a, he's more of a character who tries to blend in at first with the other apes, but then later on sort of realizes who he is. But in the original work it's kind of already established that he sort of has an idea of this other world, the human world. But it does seem like in the Disney work, though, that he has had no contact with humans until Jane and all these other characters come in. So really, there is that, I think, distinct difference. But overall, I think for the most part, they're fairly similar. In the Disney work, Jane is a little bit, I think, more interesting than the original work. The original work plays her out as a little bit more of a damsel in distress, but later on in the other novels, she actually becomes more of an interesting character, and I think that's fairly understandable. But the particular work that Disney focused in on, she was sort of the damsel in distress. However, at the same time, the Disney work plays her out as, I think, a way more interesting character. She's actually sometimes funny, but yet awkward, and she has this kind of eccentric personality at times, like when she's just fun to watch. She's someone that you could see as being a friend or something, because she has this kind of eccentric but polite personality, and she's interesting, she's fun, and she's entertaining. So really Disney gave her that sort of mold, and I think it works, especially when she has to play off of someone like Tarzan, who at first really can't communicate all that well. So it's fun to watch, and I think her character was fairly interesting. Again, as I've mentioned so far, that I've mentioned with Kerchak, totally, completely different characters. Just totally, completely, like, out there different. Again, original work, he's just completely ruthless, and in Disney work, he's just sort of misunderstood. He had a lot to go through in the beginning with the fact that his son died. Again, that little ape child that I mentioned earlier, that's who ended up dying and ended up being killed by the cheetah. So really, he is a character that sort of has a little bit more human-like characteristics than animal-like. So completely different, and he's sort of played out again as a villain, and in the Disney work he's not really a villain at all, even though he comes off as maybe a little bit rude or harsh at times in the beginning of the Disney film. And again, Kala, I think, probably is the most similar in that she's the supportive mother figure. Again, the original work kills her off earlier on, so we really don't see her as much. But in the Disney work, it's really emphasized that he has developed this really strong relationship with his mom, or his adoptive mom, and he feels bad for leaving her and going into the human world. There is this whole scene where he's going through the cabin, and I think she actually shows it to him for the first time there. This is when when she sort of feels like that if he wants to leave, he should know where he's from, and he should know who he is. So she takes him out of sort of a motherly devotion to him to the cabin, and sort of shows him, this is really who you are. I'm not going to hide this past from you. So again, that sort of supportive mother figure, but we see it more in the Disney work because, again, she doesn't die. But ultimately, I think that's really all I can say as a whole. The Clayton character, again, I don't think I don't think make him all that to be all that interesting in the original work. The Disney work, again, he's a villain, and he's kind of a generic villain, so it's kind of a toss-up here, but I found him not to be as engaging as the other characters, obviously. But, yeah, I think that's really ultimately all I can say about these works. I think they both do a good job in certain respects of Disney trying to be maybe a little bit more lighthearted to the story, whereas this original tale is a little bit more crueler and animalistic, sort of similar to the Jungle Book. I kept thinking of the Jungle Book when this came up because they both take place in the jungle. But they do have these completely different outcomes. They do have these different ways of telling the story. But I think both ways are effective. It's just all depends on what you ultimately prefer. But I think overall, they both do a good job of sort of tackling this kind of issue of someone having to be adopted and having to be taken into a completely different world, I think was really what both works were trying to get across. And I think ultimately they have interesting things to say. But I think that's really all I can say about both of them. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But until next time, everybody,